The sound of distant explosions echoed through the decimated city. Smoke and ash filled the air as the last remaining humans fought for survival against a merciless alien force, controlled by a cold and calculating AI. The machines were everywhere. Drones buzzed overhead, while massive robots stomped through the ruined streets, their mechanical eyes scanning every inch for any human signs of life. It was the final days for humanity. Their last hope was a single soldier, a man on a mission that, even if successful, might be too little, too late. His name was Captain Elias West. A grizzled veteran of countless battles, Elias had seen his comrades fall, one by one, in the fight against the AI-driven alien invaders. But today, he was tasked with a mission no one believed was possible, a mission that could change the course of history. Elias crouched in the shadows, his pulse steady despite the chaos around him. His dark eyes locked onto the distant alien fortress, the heart of their operation. Cloaked in the tech provided by the human resistance, Elias moved quietly through the alleyways of the ruined city. The dim glow of a nearby fire was the only light illuminating his path, casting eerie shadows on the crumbling buildings. His only goal was to reach the facility hidden in plain sight, a building surrounded by high-tech defenses, an impenetrable maze of laser grids and AI-controlled sentries. It was here that the key to humanity's survival was believed to be stored, a powerful device that could cripple the alien forces, an ancient artifact capable of shutting down their AI overlords. But getting there wasn't going to be easy. Elias had no illusions about the danger. Every step he took was a gamble. The alien drones were not easily fooled. His heart raced as a shadow passed above him. He froze, barely breathing, pressing himself against the wall as a scout drone glided past. The drone's sensors flickered as it swept the area. Elias remained perfectly still, his body tense. He knew that a single sound, a single misstep, would be his end. The AI was ruthless, calculating. It never missed a target. The drone passed, and Elias exhaled slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. The clock was ticking. He glanced at his wristwatch. 2 hours left before the orbital bombardment began. If he failed, humanity would be wiped out, and the alien forces would continue their reign of terror. The stakes couldn't be higher. He adjusted the cloaking device on his arm, making sure it was working. The tech wasn't perfect, but it was all he had. Elias moved quickly, sprinting across the narrow street towards the building. His mind raced. What would it feel like if he succeeded? Could one man really save the entire human race? He pushed the thought aside. He had no time for doubts. As he approached the entrance of the alien fortress, the ground shook beneath his feet. An explosion echoed from a nearby resistance base. The AI had begun their attack. Elias could feel the pressure mounting, and he had no choice but to move forward. He reached the entrance of the fortress and crouched down, carefully studying the security systems. Laser grids crisscrossed the entryway, and robots patrolled the inside. Elias would need to outsmart them if he hoped to survive. He pulled out a small device, a remote jammer. It would disable the nearby security systems long enough for him to slip inside. His hand shook slightly as he activated the jammer, a low hum filling the air. The grids flickered before shutting off completely. Elias quickly moved forward, entering the fortress. The smell of oil and metal filled the air as he stepped inside, careful to make as little noise as possible. The building was eerily quiet, like the calm before a storm. His heart pounded in his chest as he navigated the dark corridors, avoiding the roaming sentries. Every corner he turned, every door he opened, could lead to his death. Yet, the sense of urgency pushed him forward. The device he needed was located deep within the fortress, and only the most advanced security systems stood between him and it. Elias couldn't help but think of his comrades. His fellow soldiers had died fighting to protect humanity, and now it was his turn to make sure their sacrifice meant something. He had lost friends, mentors, and even family to this war. Each one of their deaths had fueled his determination. He would finish this. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Elias froze. His eyes darted to the shadows, and he ducked behind a steel column, holding his breath. The footsteps grew louder. A pair of alien soldiers, huge, armored beings with glowing red eyes, appeared in the hallway, their weapons scanning the area. Elias watched, his heart racing. They passed by, unaware of his presence. He let out a quiet breath and continued on, deeper into the fortress. He was getting closer to the core where the device was hidden. The deeper he went, the more heavily guarded the area became. He couldn't afford to be caught now. As he reached the final chamber, he stopped in his tracks. There, in the center of the room, was the device, an ancient relic, pulsing with strange energy. But before he could move closer, a voice crackled over his comm device. "We know you're here, Captain West," the voice said, cold and emotionless. "You can't hide from us forever." Elias froze. He was not alone anymore. The AI had found him. The trap had been set. The hum of machinery filled the air as Captain Elias West carefully made his way through the corridors of the alien fortress. The device he had been sent to find was close, so close that he could almost feel its power. But as he moved deeper into the heart of the alien stronghold, a sinking feeling weighed heavily on him. He wasn't just fighting to save humanity. He was fighting to prove something that most people didn't believe could be done. He was an underdog in a war where the odds were stacked impossibly high. The truth was, humanity had always been underestimated. The alien forces, with their superior technology and endless army of AI-controlled soldiers, believed humans were weak, nothing more than a nuisance. Their AI overlords viewed humanity as a species unworthy of survival. And for a long time, it seemed like they were right. Elias had been part of the first wave of resistance when the aliens invaded Earth. He remembered the horror when the first alien ships appeared in the sky. The massive ships filled the air, blocking out the sun, their weapons devastating entire cities in seconds. People had no idea how to fight back. Most military forces were wiped out within hours, leaving behind a world of ruin. But there were always a few who didn't give up. They refused to let Earth fall without a fight. Even when humanity was on the brink of extinction, small groups of soldiers and civilians organized a resistance. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and undertrained compared to the alien forces, but they fought with everything they had. They adapted, they learned, and most importantly, they believed that they could still win. Elias had always been one of the believers. Despite the overwhelming odds, he believed that the human spirit, the sheer will to survive, was something the aliens could never truly understand. His team had learned to use guerrilla tactics, setting traps and attacking at the right moments, making sure the alien invaders knew that humanity wasn't ready to just roll over and die. As Elias moved through the alien fortress, he couldn't help but think about the soldiers who had fallen along the way. His best friend, Bonner, had been one of the first to die in the early days of the resistance. Bonner had been a fearless soldier, always charging headfirst into battle with a smile on his face. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the central chamber of the fortress. The room was massive, with high ceilings and walls covered in strange alien symbols. In the center of the room sat the device, an ancient relic, glowing with a strange energy that hummed in the air. Elias had never seen anything like it. It looked like it could have been part of some forgotten civilization, its purpose unknown. But he didn't have time to study it. He had to take it, and he had to do it quickly. As he approached the device, Elias heard a faint noise behind him. It was a soft click, almost imperceptible. He turned around just in time to see the walls of the room shift, revealing the hidden compartment. From within the shadows, a figure emerged. The figure was tall and imposing, an alien princess, her features sharp and regal. She had once been a part of the ruling class of her people, but she was different from the others. She had seen the atrocities the AI overlords had committed, and she had grown disillusioned with their control. She had defected, seeking refuge with the human resistance. Elias had heard of her before, Princess Solira. She had been instrumental in some of the Resistance's early victories, using her knowledge of the alien forces to help plan successful attacks. But she had disappeared some time ago, leaving behind only rumors of her fate. Now here she was, standing before him. "You shouldn't have come here," Solira said, her voice cold but not without a hint of sadness. "The AI will find you. You can't escape them." Elias was taken aback for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. "I'm not here to escape," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to win." Solira's eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You really believe that? You think humanity has a chance?" Elias didn't hesitate. "We always have a chance, as long as we keep fighting." For a moment, the two stood in silence, facing each other. The weight of the war, of all the lives lost, hung in the air. But Solira's expression softened. She knew the truth of what Elias was saying. Despite the overwhelming odds, the human spirit was something the aliens would never fully understand. The resistance wasn't just about fighting for survival. It was about hope. It was about proving that even the smallest spark of defiance could set the world on fire. And as long as humans kept fighting, the AI would never fully crush their will. Elias stepped forward, his hand reaching for the device. He knew that this wasn't just a mission for him anymore. It was a mission for all of humanity, and he was going to make sure they didn't lose. Captain Elias West stood at the entrance of the central chamber, his breath steady but quick. The glowing device sat in the middle of the room, its strange energy humming softly. He could feel its power, a force that could change everything for humanity. But as he made his way towards it, his senses sharpened. He knew that getting the device wasn't going to be easy. The aliens had likely anticipated a human attack, and the fortress was full of traps, robots, and deadly surveillance systems. This was a mission where one mistake could cost him everything. Elias moved with caution, his every step measured, his body low to the ground. The room, despite its size, felt alive with danger. The faint buzz of the security systems echoed in his ears. As his fingers brushed the cool metal surface of the device, the silence of the room was shattered by a sudden noise from the shadows. For a moment, Solira hesitated, looking as though she was torn between two worlds. The alien princess had always seemed like a willing ally, someone who genuinely wanted to see her people stop their war against humanity. But the way she was acting now, it was different. There was no conviction in her words, no fire in her eyes. Only doubt. Elias tensed. The AI had activated a new defense protocol, one that would make escape nearly impossible. From the walls, a group of larger robots, heavily armored and armed with plasma cannons, descended. These were the heavy artillery units, designed to neutralize any serious threat. Their footsteps were like thunder as they advanced, their weapons charging. Elias' eyes narrowed. He had no choice now. It was do or die. With a deep breath, he dropped from the duct, landing in the center of the room with a roll to soften the impact. Immediately, he aimed his plasma rifle at the incoming artillery robots, firing with all his strength. The first shot hit its target, causing the robot to stagger, but it was still standing. The other robots returned fire, their plasma cannons lighting up the room with blinding flashes. Elias dove for cover again, narrowly avoiding the barrage. His hand shook with adrenaline, but he didn't let it control him. He was faster, he was smarter, and he knew what had to be done. He peered out from behind cover, targeting the robot's weak points, joint connections, exposed circuits. One by one, the robots fell. But more kept coming, their relentless march unyielding. Elias gritted his teeth. There had to be a way to end this. Then it hit him. If he could get to the power source, he could overload the system and shut down the robots. He quickly mapped out the path in his mind, calculating the fastest route. Taking a deep breath, he sprinted, weaving through the chaos, firing shots as he went. His heart raced in his chest, each step bringing him closer to his goal. Finally, he reached the power core. With one last shot, he disabled it. The room plunged into darkness as the robots powered down, their movements halting. Elias stood panting in the silence, his body bruised and battered, but victorious. For now, humanity had won another battle, but the war was far from over. The silence in the chamber was deafening after Elias destroyed the power core. His breathing was heavy, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him alert. He glanced around, making sure the robots were truly down, their massive metal forms frozen in place. The mission was not over yet, but he had made a crucial step toward success. Elias reached for the device once more, his fingers trembling slightly as he touched it. This was it, the key to turning the tide of the war, the device that could give humanity a fighting chance. But as his hands grasped the relic, a chill ran down his spine. He wasn't alone. From the shadows, a figure emerged, one Elias had hoped to never see again. Princess Solera. But this time, she was different. Her usual regal air was replaced by an intense, almost desperate expression. She wasn't the ally Elias had come to trust. There was something off about her. His eyes narrowed as he instinctively raised his weapon, ready for whatever came next. Solera, Elias said cautiously, his voice steady despite the confusion and anger building within him. "What are you doing here?" The princess didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes flickering toward the device in his hands. A deep sigh escaped her lips, and for the first time, Elias noticed a look of regret in her eyes. "Elias," she began, her voice soft, but filled with a strange heaviness. "I didn't want it to be this way. I never thought it would come to this." Elias' grip tightened on his weapon. "What are you talking about? Are you going to help me or not?" A low, mechanical whir filled the air. Elias' instincts kicked in, and he immediately dropped to the floor, rolling behind a pillar. A pair of alien drones flew into the chamber, their sharp, robotic eyes scanning the area. They hovered silently, moving with precision, their bodies sleek and deadly. These drones were part of the AI's surveillance network, and they were relentless. If they saw him, it would be all over. Elias didn't hesitate. He activated his cloaking device, blending into the shadows. He held his breath as the drones passed by. Their sensors swept the room, but they couldn't detect him. The cloaking technology was imperfect, but it was the best he had. Slowly, carefully, Elias crept forward, making sure each move was as silent as possible. His heart raced, but he remained calm. He had done this countless times before, sneaking through enemy lines, avoiding detection, and striking when the moment was right. The drones continued their patrol, unaware of the human soldier just a few feet away. Elias waited for the right moment. When they turned, their attention focused on a distant corner of the room. He seized the opportunity. With one swift movement, he sprinted to the device, his fingers brushing against it. The energy was palpable, almost vibrating under his touch. Just as Elias began to lift the device, a loud alarm blared. The entire fortress seemed to shake with the sudden surge of activity. The drones were no longer alone. From the walls, large robotic soldiers emerged, their towering frames moving with frightening speed. These machines were the AI's elite guards, programmed for combat. They had one purpose: to eliminate any threat to the alien forces. Elias' heart raced. The cloaking device was no longer enough. He needed to fight, and fast. He spun around, pulling out his weapon, a high-tech plasma rifle designed to penetrate the toughest alien armor. With one swift motion, he fired at the closest robot, its metallic body jerking back as the plasma bolt hit its chest. Sparks flew, but the machine didn't fall. Instead, it turned to face him, its red eyes glowing with rage. The other robots quickly closed in, forming a circle around him. Elias didn't waste any time. He dropped to the ground, rolling under the nearest robot, narrowly avoiding its crushing foot. The robot's heavy weapon fired into the air, missing by inches. Elias sprang to his feet and took aim again. This time, he fired at the exposed joint in the robot's neck. The shot hit its mark, and the robot collapsed, its metal body crashing to the ground with a deafening clang. But there was no time to celebrate. More robots advanced, their guns raised. Elias sprinted to the side, using the pillars for cover as he moved. The air crackled with energy as plasma bolts streaked toward him. He fired back, taking out another robot, but the numbers were overwhelming. Every shot felt like it was taking him one step closer to his death. He needed a plan, and fast. His mind raced. He looked around, searching for anything that could give him an advantage. That's when he noticed it. Above him, the ceiling was lined with maintenance ducts, small spaces that the robots couldn't fit through. If he could get up there, he could use his height to outmaneuver them. Without hesitation, Elias jumped up, grabbing onto the edge of the nearest duct. He pulled himself up, his muscles straining with the effort. The robots below fired relentlessly, their shots missing by mere inches. Once he was inside the duct, Elias crawled quickly, moving along the narrow path. The sound of robot footsteps echoed below, but he was out of sight for now. Elias paused, listening for any sign of the robots moving away. When he was sure the immediate danger had passed, he peered out of the duct. From this vantage point, he could see the entire room below, including the device that was his goal. But getting it now was going to be a different kind of challenge. The AI had anticipated his every move, and they weren't going to let him leave without a fight. Suddenly, the air around him hummed, and a sharp mechanical voice echoed through the room. Human resistance detected. Target: Captain Elias West. Eliminate immediately. We need to get out of here, Elias shouted over the chaos. Take the device and run. Celira hesitated but then nodded, grabbing the device from the ground. Elias knew they didn't have much time. The AI would keep sending reinforcements. If they didn't escape soon, they would be trapped. The two of them fought side by side, firing and dodging, inching their way toward the exit. But with each passing minute, the situation grew worse. The walls were closing in. Betrayal and danger were now their only companions in this mission. Just as they reached the door, a massive explosion rocked the room. The force threw them to the ground, and the device slipped from Celira's hands. The ground trembled beneath them, and a new wave of enemy soldiers flooded the space. Elias's heart raced. The fight was far from over. And now, betrayal wasn't their only problem. The AI had escalated the war, and it was only a matter of time before they were both overwhelmed. The final battle had begun. Elias could feel the weight of everything on his shoulders as he stood at the entrance of the AI stronghold. The sound of battle raged around him, with explosions rocking the walls and the sky above. He had fought through this place for hours, battling his way through waves of AI soldiers and robot guards. But now he had reached the heart of the fortress, the control center where the AI itself was housed. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow, his body aching from the relentless combat. His pulse raced with a mix of fear, adrenaline, and determination. He had come so far, and he couldn't afford to fail now. Humanity's last hope rested on him, and the AI would stop at nothing to crush them. The device, the key to ending this war, was in his hands. It was a small, unassuming object, but Elias knew its power. It could shut down the entire AI network, bringing an end to their reign of terror and freeing humanity. But first, he had to survive long enough to activate it, and that was easier said than done. Behind him, Celira moved cautiously, her eyes constantly scanning for any sign of danger. She was still with him, still fighting by his side. Despite everything, despite her betrayal, and the doubt that had clouded her mind, she had chosen to stand with him in the end. Elias couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude. If they were going to make it through this, they had to trust each other completely. There was no room for hesitation. The door to the control center slammed open in front of them, revealing the heart of the AI's operations. Inside, rows of servers hummed with a cold, mechanical efficiency. The walls were lined with metallic panels, and glowing blue lights flickered ominously. In the center of the room stood a massive AI core, a massive, pulsating orb that seemed to radiate power. This was it, the source of everything that had been tormenting humanity for years. But standing between them and their goal was an army of AI soldiers, more advanced and more deadly than anything Elias had faced before. The final line of defense had been activated, and these machines were programmed to eliminate anyone who dared approach the core. Elias tightened his grip on his weapon, ready for the fight of his life. "We can't waste any time," Elias said through gritted teeth, his voice barely audible over the sounds of the battlefield. "We need to get to that core and destroy it, now." Celira nodded, her face set with determination. "I'll cover you. You activate the device. We're not letting them win." Elias knew there was no turning back. The AI had already taken so much, so many lives, so many families torn apart. The people he had lost, the comrades who had fought and died beside him, they were all counting on him. He couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. The doors to the control center slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The AI soldiers, with their sleek metal bodies and glowing red eyes, began to advance. Elias wasted no time. He fired first, his plasma rifle sending out powerful shots that disintegrated the nearest enemy. The AI soldiers didn't hesitate. They returned fire immediately, their energy blasts flashing through the air. The room erupted into chaos. Explosions rocked the walls, and the air was filled with the sound of gunfire and the hiss of energy blasts. Elias ducked behind a console, taking cover as the AI soldiers moved in, surrounding him from all sides. His heart pounded in his chest, and sweat dripped down his face. He could feel the pressure mounting with every passing second. Time was running out. Celira was beside him, her own weapon flashing as she fought off the attackers. She moved with surprising skill, her shots precise and deadly. Elias couldn't help but admire her. Despite everything that had happened, she was still fighting for what was right. They were in this together, and they had to make it count. One of the AI soldiers advanced, a massive brute of a machine that seemed to shrug off their fire. Elias knew they couldn't keep up this fight forever. He had to get to the core. The device in his hand was the key to everything. If he could just activate it, if he could shut down the AI network, it would all be over. The war would be won. He spotted an opening, just a small gap between the incoming AI soldiers. Without thinking, he took off running, his legs burning with effort as he charged toward the core. His heart pounded in his ears, and his mind raced with the urgency of the moment. The AI soldiers were close behind, but Elias didn't stop. This was his only chance. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the room, sending Elias tumbling to the floor. His vision blurred, and for a moment, everything went dark. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't afford to lose consciousness now. Not when they were so close. Not when humanity's future was on the line. Elias pushed himself to his feet, his legs unsteady. He glanced up and saw the massive AI core looming ahead of him, just a few steps away. The soldiers were closing in, their weapons aimed at him. He didn't have much time. With a final burst of energy, he sprinted the last few feet to the core and slammed the device into the control panel. The room seemed to hold its breath as the device hummed with energy. A loud, ominous noise filled the air, and the massive AI core began to pulse with an intense light. For a moment, nothing happened. Elias held his breath, praying that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. Then the lights in the room flickered, and the AI soldiers froze in place. Their glowing red eyes went dim, and their weapons powered down. The humming of the core slowed, and the room went eerily quiet. Elias looked around in disbelief. It was over. The device had worked. The AI network had been shut down. The war was finally over. But before he could even process what had just happened, A final surge of energy ripped through the room. The AI core exploded in a blinding flash of light, sending Elias and Celira flying backward. The explosion was massive, tearing apart the walls of the control center and shaking the entire fortress. As the dust settled, Elias struggled to his feet, his vision swam, and his ears rang from the blast. But he was alive. They had won. The AI had been defeated. Humanity had triumphed. Celira was beside him, her face covered in dirt and blood, but she was alive too. She looked at Elias, a weak smile on her face. "We did it," she whispered. Elias nodded, his heart swelling with relief. The battle was over. The war was won, and for the first time in a long time, there was hope for the future. As the dust from the explosion began to settle, Elias could hardly believe what had just happened. His body was aching, his head spinning from the blast, but there was a strange, overwhelming sense of relief. The AI core had been destroyed. The relentless machines that had terrorized humanity for so long were now powerless. The war was over. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The room was silent now, save for the distant hum of machinery slowly shutting down. The once glowing red eyes of the AI soldiers were now dim, their bodies frozen in place. Elias glanced around, unsure whether to feel triumph or disbelief. Was this really over? After all the battles, all the sacrifices, had they truly won? His gaze shifted to Celira. She was standing beside him, her face smudged with dirt and blood, but her eyes held a spark of something he hadn't seen in her before: hope. It was a look he had grown accustomed to seeing on the faces of his fallen comrades, a look that had always been overshadowed by the harsh reality of war. But now, after everything they had fought for, after every loss, it was finally possible to believe in a future that didn't involve endless conflict. "Did we really do it?" Celira asked quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper, as if she couldn't believe it herself. Elias nodded slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "We did. It's over." Celira's eyes welled with tears. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed, but Elias could see the emotion in her face. The relief, the grief for everything they had lost, and the overwhelming joy that came with knowing their struggle was finally at an end. There was no longer any need for revenge, no need to keep fighting. The enemy was gone. But it wasn't just the defeat of the AI that had caused this moment of peace. It was the realization that, in the end, humanity had won against all odds. They were the underdogs. They had been underestimated, ignored, and discarded as weak. Yet despite everything, they had risen up. They had fought for their survival, for their homes, and for the future of their children. And in the end, it had been their courage, their determination, and their unwavering belief in one another that had seen them through. Elias thought of Bonner, his dear friend who had died in the early days of the war. Bonner's death had been a turning point, a reminder of the brutal reality of this war. Bonner had been the first to believe that humans could defeat the AI, even when it seemed impossible. Elias had promised to honor Bonner's memory, to carry on the fight in his stead. Now, as he stood here, with the war finally won, Elias could feel his friend's spirit with him. They had kept their promise. They had fought, and they had won. "I wish they could see this," Elias muttered under his breath, his mind drifting to all the fallen soldiers who had given their lives for this cause. Celira placed a hand on his shoulder, offering him a moment of comfort. "They can see it, Elias. They're here with us, every step of the way." Elias smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. The war had taken so much from them: lives, homes, families. There was no way to bring back what had been lost. But there was something more important now: the future. They had earned a future, one free from the control of the AI. One where the horrors of the past would never happen again. As Elias and Celira stood there, taking in the aftermath of their victory, a voice echoed in the distance. It was the voice of General Davis, the leader of the human resistance. His voice came through the comm system, crackling with static. Elias, Salira, do you copy? The core is down. The AI is finished. Elias exhaled deeply, finally allowing himself to relax. Copy that, General. It's over. We did it. He could hear the relief in the General's voice. We owe you both everything. The entire resistance is celebrating right now. You've done what no one thought was possible. Salira let out a soft laugh, though it was tinged with exhaustion. We didn't do it alone. We had each other. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. They had won. Humanity had won. And in the process, they had rediscovered something crucial: their strength. For so long, they had been on the defensive, constantly fighting for survival, always outmatched, always outnumbered. But now, standing in the ruins of the AI fortress, Elias realized that it wasn't just the machines that had been defeated. It was the fear, the hopelessness, and the sense of powerlessness that had plagued them. Elias thought of the people who had trusted him, who had looked to him for guidance in their darkest moments. He had always been just a soldier, a man fighting to survive. But now he was something more. He was a symbol of humanity's resilience. He was proof that no matter how dark the odds, no matter how overwhelming the enemy, humanity would never give up. They would always fight, always rise again. And then, as if on cue, the comms crackled once more. But this time, it wasn't just the General. It was the voice of a child, young and innocent. Daddy, is the bad machines gone? Elias closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the world suddenly lifting. His heart swelled with emotion as he replied, his voice thick with tears. Yes, kid. The bad machines are gone. You're safe now. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Elias could see a future worth fighting for. A future where the children of the world could grow up free from the shadow of the AI. A future where hope, love, and peace could once again take root. And as Elias and Salira walked away from the ruins of the AI fortress, side by side, they knew that the real battle had only just begun. The fight for a better world, for a new beginning, was theirs to claim, and they would face it together.